name is Yasharth Shekhar, and this was my third attempt in UPSC. And in the first attempt, I could not clear prelims. In the second one, I reached the interview stage, and when I checked my marks, my geography score was 251. I scored 114 in paper 1 and 137 in paper 2, and I had missed the cutoff by around 13 marks. This year, I have scored around 306 marks in geography, 156 marks in paper 1 and 150 marks in paper 2. And during this phase of 7 and 8 months when I was preparing for my geography optional, I did do some things to improve my score because I believe that, first of all, I decided to focus more on geography because I realized that marks in optional can be very high if you work really hard for it. So I think my marks should give some essence as to the fact that geography is a very high scoring subject, because a lot of time we hear that okay, people are not getting good marks in it, and my rank is probably because of the fact that I've got such good scores in geography optional. So I'll be sharing a few tips. It will not be very detailed thing, but for detailed thing we can meet in future. So it will be a few tips and tricks that I did to improve my marks. In UPSC 2020, I had scored 251, which came out to be 114 plus 137, paper 1 and paper 2. And in this year, I've got 306 marks, scoring 156 in paper 1 and 115 paper 2. So I'll be sharing about certain aspects of my preparation which changed this year, or which I emphasized more this year, which helped me to improve my marks by around 55, which helped me to improve my marks by around 55 marks. So and that helped me in getting the rank that I have today. So the first thing is, last year I had focused more on preparing what I can read in my notes or whatever is there in the notes, so that I'm aware of what is given in my notes, because I already made notes in the past years. So note making was not an issue. I'd already had good notes. The issue was revision, and once you have revised it well, how are you going to utilize it? For that you need to do a lot of tests. And one issue that arose last year was that, because it was probably my first attempt at UPSC, I failed to realize the importance of test series. And so I realized that once you take a test series, you can revise that same notes, I think 10 times, even I think not 10 times, but at least 4 or 5 times, and that would be more than sufficient for you to be able to generate enough command over the subject so that you are able to score easily above 135. So notes revision, I had revised it by at least 5-6 times, only because of test series, and I had written around 10 tests. I think on the whole, while preparing for UPSC 2021, I have given around 26 to 28 full length tests, out of which 10 tests was solely devoted to geography, because I had focused mainly on geography as an optional, because I realized the high scoring potential of the subject, because we've seen so many people in the past have scored such good marks in geography. It's just that this general perception that has been created among certain people that geography is really not high scoring, I think it's not true to a great extent. Okay, so the first thing that we did was to make notes, and which I had already done in the past. The thing was to revise. And how did I revise it? You revise it by focusing your preparation around test series. And the second thing would be doing as many tests as possible. Doing as many tests as possible. I wrote around 10 tests, and out of which 5 were paper 1 and 5 were paper 2. out of which 4 were sectional and 1 was full length. Now I focus more on the sectional aspect because I wanted to improve certain specific areas. For example, in geography paper 1, I focus more on geomorphology aspect, and in paper 2 paper 2 I focused more on contemporary issues because they're usually very current based and gives you the scope, gives you ample opportunity to write different kind of content. Okay. The second thing would be integrating current affairs. And how do you do that? You integrate current affairs through the use of examples. And paper 2 gives you an opportunity to integrate current affairs through the use of case studies. So, an example of case study that I can give is that there was a question in paper 2, Indian Geography. I think it was about critically analyze the economical and environmental issues of interlinking of rivers. And I gave a very specific case study of Ken-Betwa river link project, and I mentioned there Dodhan Dam, Or Dam. I had even mentioned certain specific cities like Chhatarpur, Khajuraho, Rewa, and for that matter, in case studies, and also talked about Panna Tiger Reserve. So the more regional, and again the third aspect would be, the fourth aspect would be regional maps, regional aspect and maps. And I think this is one of the most important area that I think every aspirant who is coming from geography optional background needs to focus on, regional aspect. Now when we talk about regional aspect, I think it would be better to explain it with the help of an example. I think there was a question in paper 2, Indian Geography, discuss the distribution and production of different varieties of coal in India. So I remember that, once you are answering this question, a diagram becomes most important, because until unless you are using diagrams, you won't be able to show in which part of India you will be finding different types of coal. So, for example, when I was talking about let's say Gondwana type of coal, I did not simply drew the diagram of India like this. Now this is a kind of diagram that you would draw in a GS paper. For answering questions in optional, for example, as part of regional diagram making, the focus should be on, for example, if you're talking about the Gondwana coal, one of the states where Gondwana coal is found is Jharkhand. So you draw a diagram of Jharkhand, a very rough diagram of Jharkhand like this. And for example, and then you talk about certain coal fields in Jharkhand. And then, for example, when you're talking about let's say Chhattisgarh, then you draw a diagram something like this, and you talk about that what are the coal fields in Jharkhand. Or for example, when you're talking about let's say lignite coal, which is found in Neyveli, then you draw a diagram something like this, and then you show that there is a city called Lignite here, okay, Neyveli here. And for example, when you are mentioning a place like Umarsar, which is found in Gujarat, then you draw a diagram of Gujarat like this, and then you show a place that this is Umarsar. So now this will bring regional aspect to your diagram, and then you will be able to portray in greater depth and detail as to what you know about that issue, and you will be able to convey your point of view to the examiner or somebody who is checking your question paper more effectively. Another example that I can give you is that when a question was asked on industrial corridor in paper 2 Indian Geography, I drew the diagram of Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, and the diagram was like this. I took Delhi, then you take Mumbai, and then you draw the industrial corridor like this. Not only like this, you'll have to mention certain specific cities. For example, you will have to mention Marwar Junction. You'll have to mention Palanpur. You'll have to mention Vadodara. So by making a regional diagram, you will be able to get more marks for that same question. Another issue that I think another aspect would be, I think this would seem a little, um, how should I put it? I think this would seem a little comical, because answering the question is more important. A lot of time I've seen people, when they answer a question of paper 2, they would ask me, when I tell them that what answer I'm writing, a lot of time they would ask me, where is the geographical point of view? And the issue is not the geographical point of view. The issue is that when a lot of thinking goes into how to make your answer geographical in paper 2 Indian geography, a lot of content is also written for the same, and then you waste a lot of your space for writing something which will not give you enough marks, and then you lost the trace of what the answer should be. The focus should be on answering the question on its merit, and it's not about making your answer more geographical. Obviously, if there is an aspect that you can cover, or there is a space where you can mention about a different geographer in Indian geography paper, you're more than welcome to do so. It is only going to add value to your question, to your answers. But the problem is the overemphasis on making your answer geographical, which leads to less emphasis on answering the question itself, and that leads to a reduced quality of your answers. And for example, if you ask me, I never thought of making any answer geographical in paper 2 Indian geography. If the question is about landslide, then I'm going to write about landslides. And if at all I can't remember the name of geographer, I won't mention it. The issue is that we have to, and another aspect, now another aspect is diagram making. Does every question require making diagrams? And a lot of times we have this persuasion that we have to make diagram for every question. Whether the question is for Panchayati Raj system, for which no possible diagram I think is possible, or whether the question is for, let's say, discuss the distribution of coals, of different varieties of coal in India, for which you can draw around 8 or 10 diagrams in one question. I think this should be judged solely on the merit of the question. If a question is like Panchayati Raj, as was a question asked this year, your focus should be more on making your answer less general, in terms of making it more factual. And I remember when I answered that question, I had attempted that question, and when I answered that question, I had given different examples of the case studies, and I did not draw a single diagram for that question. And there was a question on multinational corporations, for which also I did not draw a single diagram. I only focused on giving better examples of multinational corporations. What are the negative issues of multinational corporations? What are the, I can't recall it right now, but there was a controversy of food poisoning in one of the multinational corporations in the southern part of India. I think it was somewhere on the outskirts of Chennai. So I had mentioned that example as a negative aspect of multinational corporation. When I gave examples of the positive aspects of multinational corporations, I had given examples of the Samsung factory in Noida. So you don't only have to think in terms of diagram. The diagrams are a must in geography optional paper, or diagrams, nothing can be done without a diagram in a geography optional paper. And for these two questions, I did not draw a single diagram. So the focus should be on answering question on its merits, rather than having these assumptions that a diagram will give you an extra mark, or not right, or trying to make the answer very geographical and not emphasizing on what the question is asking is going to give you more marks. Another aspect that I focused on was the fact that was on reading newspapers. And these reading newspapers have to complement with any other current affairs, popular current affairs magazine which are available in the market. You can choose any one which you like. The emphasis should be on revision rather than which you are choosing. Now, when it comes to reading newspaper, and this reading newspaper has to be complemented with writing more and more tests possible. Because if you are not reading newspapers and you are not writing as many tests as possible, you will not realize what you will have to pick from those newspapers, and you will not realize how will it be utilized in your answers. So I was reading two newspapers, and newspaper for me was a very important aspect of my preparation because I kept my answers, all the answers, especially in paper 2, very current. And uh, so I was reading Indian Express plus Mint, and these two newspapers cover so many aspects of India that paper 2 will be a cake of walk for you when it comes to giving different examples, and you don't have to make notes of these examples. You just have to study it very thoroughly. For example, I used to read newspapers for 3 hours, 1.5 hours for every newspaper, and this 3-hour session was a consolidated session between which I did not used to take any break, and this was a very important aspect of my preparation. The point is that once you're reading these newspapers very thoroughly, and when you're thinking and when you are thinking of how to write examples, this question will not arise in itself, because the moment you're writing as many tests as possible and the moment you're trying to apply those examples from these newspapers into these tests, these examples will come very easily to you when you're writing those tests, and then you will realize how do you have to read these newspapers. And I think out of all the questions that I had attempted in paper 2, my focus was solely on writing as many examples. For example, in a cloudburst question, I gave examples of at least 3-4 cloudbursts. In case of landslides, I gave example of I think 2 or 3 landslides. So in that context, you have to make your answer less general and more factual. Now, when it comes to paper 1, how do you improve marks? Because I had scored 114 marks, 114 marks last year, and my marks improved to 156 this year. I think an improvement of 42 marks. This happened because I focused more on revision. For Indian geography paper, your focus can be more on what is happening in the general environment, or what is happening, what is the general situation of the country, because the topics are so general that even if you know nothing, or even if you have read nothing about it, and even if you read just your general studies, you would know enough to write an answer, okay, which might not fetch you good enough marks, but you would know what to write. It is only certain amount of preparation that will prepare you for getting very good marks in paper 2. But when it comes to paper 1, your emphasis should only be on revision. Revision is the key. And here I would like to emphasize upon the fact that in part B, make sure that you mention some philosopher, some geographical, some person of geographical importance. The thoughts are going to come, are going to become very important for you. Models should be extremely thorough. And my personal view is that your focus should be more on attempting part A optional question as compared to part B optional question, because human geography will not give you, that's my perception, human geography will not fetch you as many marks as compared to physical geography. So my focus was primarily on that. And here, if you can draw a diagram, that's more than sufficient. But if you're not able to draw a diagram, you can also give many examples. Also, for example, there was a question on altiplanation. Now, a lot of people did not know how to write this answer. I had not read much about altiplanation, but I had understood the basic concept of altiplanation. And that's why while writing that answer, I gave examples I gave examples of the places where this altiplanation can be found, for example, in the polar areas or in near Antarctica. And I also gave I also drew 3 diagrams, and I think that worked well for me. When it comes to answering general questions, which seem very general in paper 1, um, your emphasis should be more on how you can make them more factual, and factuals can be done by giving examples, and for that you need to read newspapers. And though it might not seem that newspapers may be very helpful in paper 1, but many articles usually you will find, especially for example in the explained section of Indian Express or in the long story of the Mint, which will to a great extent help you to give examples. And in paper 1, I think a lot of people do not make notes. I think this worked for me. A lot of people do not make notes of geomorphology section or oceanography section. I had made notes of all these different topics. So I had notes of geomorphology, I had notes of climatology, I had notes of oceanography, biogeography, and I emphasized on these 4 issues. I did not focus much on the environmental geography. Apart from that, I also had this habit that if I find that certain topic was not well covered in my notes, I would simply tear out those pages from the books. Okay, I did not like that, but once you're preparing and the syllabus is too huge, you do certain things um, which are not ethical, but that was one aspect of my preparation, where for example I remember my notes on jet streams were not so good. So what I did is that I tore out certain pages from Savindra Singh's jet stream pages, and I stick it in my notes. So that gave me a very comprehensive view of the issue, view of the topic. And another thing, again, I cannot emphasize enough, would be to practice as many tests as possible, especially in paper 1, because paper 1 is I think is a slightly tougher paper as compared to paper 2. However, it is more scoreable than paper 2 because of the fact that they will ask you concepts in paper 1, and if you know those concepts well, you will get very good marks. For example, there was a question this time on welfare geographers. So if you know about those welfare geographers, there's hardly anything that can take your marks away from you. And for example, there was a question on plate tectonics and isostasy. If you know about these concepts in detail, then you will get very good marks out of 20. And similar is the case with other questions that have been asked in paper 1, which simply talked about the concept. For example, the gene pool question, the altiplanation question, the air mass question. All of these questions revolved around the basic concept which you had to understand and which you had to answer, and such questions will fetch very good marks. On the other hand, the paper 2, since it has a lot of general questions, now general questions, if somebody has written them in a very good manner, he will get very good marks. But generally it happens that since there is no specific concept involved in answering general questions, the average marks distribution would be slightly low. So I think a little more focus, I think that helped, that paid off for me, because I focused more on paper 1. Paper 2, I'd scored I think reasonably well in last year also, but I focused more on writing examples, case studies, and writing more tests, drawing more diagrams. And when I say diagrams, I had actually drawn very few diagrams in my first attempt, even where it was necessary. So these things worked for me. So in brief, I can say for paper 1, I think revision and writing as many tests is very important, because having good understanding of concepts in paper 1 is very important. If you know your concepts well, you will score very good. And again, integrating current affairs, using case studies, examples, and answering in regional aspect becomes very important. And doing as many tests also becomes very important. Apart from that, paper 2 is more a test of your general abilities. Use all the sources available in the world. Use newspapers, current affairs magazines, internet, YouTube videos, anywhere you can find information to write answers in paper 2 by giving examples, case studies and regional aspect and map. If you are able to integrate regional aspect in your answers, again I'll give you an example. The question was about Mumbai-Bangalore industrial corridor. You have to write the characteristics of Mumbai-Bangalore industrial corridor. किसी को नहीं पता होता है. Nobody knows the exact cities which lie on the Mumbai-Bangalore industrial corridor. But if you are drawing a diagram of industrial corridor, you have to draw it like this. You have drawn the map of South India, then you will show that, okay, that this is Mumbai and this is Bengaluru, and then you have to show it like this. Okay, now this is the Mumbai-Bangalore industrial corridor. You have to make it more regional. For that, you will add cities, like for example, add Pune, add Dharwad. No, Pune a lot of people will know, but Dharwad, writing Dharwad or knowing about Dharwad will give your answer a very, will give somebody who is checking your question answers a very good impression of your understanding of the regional dynamics at play. And then you will mention, like, let's say Tumkur. So now by mentioning these two cities, you have made your answer very regional. And then you show other things, like what are the important industrial areas around the cities, or what are the important growing hubs of industries around this region which will be held by this industrial corridor. So again, regional aspect becomes very important, answering the questions becomes very important, and diagram making only when it is required in the questions and not forcing it on to the question becomes very important. And I think if you do these aspects well, I think you'll be able to score very good marks. I may come with a much detailed video on other aspects of answer writing, but I think in brief, I think these 6 or 5, 6 things were the foundation of my geography preparation, and I think these really helped because I was able to improve my score from around 251 to 306. Now 306 seems to be obviously we're not very used to 300 above figures in geography for a very long period of time. There are many people who've done it, and I think if you follow all these things and answering question to the point, drawing diagrams where necessary, not necessarily forcing the geographical point of view, it will go a long way in improving your scores also. So I think in brief I can say that this was my whole preparation plan for geography, and focusing in geography. For example, if I had 3 hours to study, I would study 2 hours for geography and 1 hour for the GS, because I realized that there is a ceiling to what you can score in general studies, but there is no such ceiling for geography as an option. So I think it would send a good message that geography as an optional is still a very high scoring subject. Thank you.